Hey everyone, and welcome back to MMA Alerts. Let's start with the fact that Islam Makhachev wants to fight Conor McGregor. The lightweight champion Islam Makhachev might be getting ready for his fight against Dustin Poirier at UFC 302. A fight with Conor McGregor, on the other hand, is already on his mind. Later in June, UFC 303 will be McGregor's return to the octagon. In a recent episode of Kamaru Usman and Henry Hutto's Pound for Pound podcast, Makhachev said that he would be willing to fight the Irish star again in August or September, depending on how things go. Any fight between Makhachev and McGregor would have to happen after the former champion beats Michael Chandler after a long break. In addition, McGregor will be trying to get back to winning ways after a terrible injury, his last fight, which makes the odds even worse for him. Next, let's look at Tom Aspinall tells the truth about the UFC 304 fight. UFC CEO Dana White recently broke the big news that temporary heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall will be one of the main events at UFC 304 in Manchester this summer. Aspinall is scheduled to fight Curtis Blaydes again in a much-anticipated rematch. However, the temporary champion says that the UFC wanted him to fight Cyril Gane instead. He talked about it in a video on his YouTube page explaining how his fight with Curtis Blaydes came about. Aspinall also made it clear that he is defending the temporary belt because it is getting the division back on track. MMA fans responded quickly to what was going on. One fan wrote that Gane ducked Pavlovich and Aspinall. Does he want to pick and choose his way to the title? Someone else said, I don't understand why Dana and the matchmakers love Gane so much. It would have been the third time he was given a title shot for almost nothing. He ought to be close to a title. He only needs to beat Cairns in Paris. Someone else in the MMA community wrote, I hate Gane. Besides his low blow, he didn't even try to fight Francis and lost to Jones. He isn't fighting Tom because he thinks he's going to become famous in movies. Guy is a joke. One fan put it all together by writing, I don't know what Gane has done to get 3 title shots. It's crazy. There are rumors that Gane will be making a movie this summer, which means that between the temporary title fight and the upcoming Jones vs. Miocic fight later this year, the division could look very different when he comes back. Next, let's see how Renato Moicano responds to the news about Paddy Pillar. A lot of fans thought that if Renato Moicano won UFC 300, the fan favorite would then fight the sprinting jerk Paddy Pimblett. They did, however, talk trash to each other a lot, which is why the UFC chose to match Pimblett up with Bobby Green. For example, he was critical of the news that Pimblett and Green would be fighting this summer in Manchester. Moicano responded on social media by writing, Moicano then shared his thoughts on all the newly announced fights for the card, making it clear that he doesn't like the co-main event rematch between Tom Aspinall and Curtis Blaydes. He wrote, Moicano said that somewhere between Green and Pimblett makes more sense for the division since he's ranked 10th. Green is ranked 15th and Pimblett is not ranked. The UFC could look into a Moicano vs. Pimblett fight if the bad guy ends up getting what they want. Now let's look at news about UFC fights before this weekend's Barboza vs. Murphy card at the Apex. Let's look at today's UFC fight news. To start, there was an official statement about the main event of UFC Fight Louisville on June 8th. The UFC has now announced that Jared Cannonier will fight Nasruddin Imavov in Louisville. The fight will be the main event and last 5 rounds. In this fight, Cannonier will try to add to his 2-fight winning streak. His most recent win was over Marvin Vettori last summer. Imavov, on the other hand, will try to build on his win over Roman Dolidze in February. The next month, on July 20th, 2 new fights were added to the UFC Vegas 94 card. Cody Durden and Bruno Silva will fight in a flyweight match, and Joe Anderson Brito will fight Dan Ige in a featherweight match, and Joe Anderson Brito will fight Dan Ige in a featherweight match. When he fights Silva, Cody Durden will be trying to get back on track after losing to Tagir Ulanbekov in December. Silva, on the other hand, will be trying to build on a 3-fight win streak that ended with the submission of Tyson Nam after being out of the octagon for almost 2 years. In the Ige Brito fight, rising prospect Joe Anderson Brito will be looking to add to his 5-fight win streak in which he has finished all 5 fights. On the other hand, Ige will be looking to build on his win over Andre Fili in February, which came after he lost to Bryce Mitchell in September. Now let's look at the next UFC fight for Ian Gary Tease. Even though a fight between Ian Gary and Colby Covington may not have gone through, it sounds like the unbeaten Irish fighter could have a fight planned for the upcoming UFC 303 show, which is headlined by Conor McGregor and Michael Chandler. In the vague social media post, Gary only used the word UFC 303 and wrote loading. So far, there's been no word on who else Gary might face besides Covington. He recently told TalkSport that he agreed to fight Michael Venom Page at UFC 303, where the fight will take place. At the time, he wasn't sure if the fight would happen because MVP and his team weren't ready to cut weight to 170 pounds for the June 29th show. The fight between Joe Pfeiffer and Marc-Andre Barriel seems to be the co-main event for UFC 303, so it's not clear if MVP has accepted the fight or not. Many fans have been asking the UFC to add another big fight to the show. Next, let us look at Paulo Costa's response to Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland and Paulo Costa have been training for their fight at UFC 302 at the start of June. Strickland recently said that he heard Costa hasn't signed the deal yet. In a social media video, the previous champion called out the person who might fight him. Costa then replied to the video with an image of a signed contract and the words "grab and go mother effer." Many fans quickly wondered if this meant he hadn't signed the contract yet, but Costa followed up with a badly edited shot and said, "Sorry, I fixed that with a fight between white people who used to be Latinos." After the jokes, Costa shared a picture of himself in Las Vegas in front of some mountains to show that he was in the country. The fight is in New Jersey, but the fact that Costa is in the U.S. is probably a good sign. With what's going on now, it's safe to say that the UFC 302 news conference will most likely be exciting. Moving on, let's look at Joaquin Buckley turns down UFC fight. Joaquin Buckley said that he would really like to fight Gilbert Burns after he asked Conor McGregor to step down. In a social media post, he also made a big deal out of the fact that he said Ian Derry has herpes on his face and that he would not fight him. People in the mixed martial arts community were confused by Buckley's words. Some fans thought he might have been joking or had actually turned down a fight with the Irish contender. Buckley recently talked to Perry Punch and said that he did turn down a fight with Gary, and for more than one reason. From what I can tell, a fight with Gary is not even on the table.